Welcome to The Sounds of Sand, a podcast inquiring into the beauty and mystery of existence beyond ultimate truths. On today's episode, I'm in conversation with renowned author and humanitarian Andrew Holecek, who teaches internationally on spirituality, meditation, lucid dreaming, and the art of dying. He has studied sleep yoga, bardo yoga, and other traditional practices with living masters in India and Nepal. We discuss his new book, I'm Mindful, Now What? Getting into the depths of meditation practice, including embodied meditation, meditations on pain, dream meditation, dream yoga, sleep yoga, and more, all today on The Sounds of Sand, presented by Science and Nonduality. All right, so I'm here with Andrew Holecek. Andrew, thank you so much for being on The Sounds of Sand podcast.
Hey, Michael. Delightful to spend some time with you. Looking forward to it.
So you have this brilliant new book, which I really loved, I'm Mindful, Now What? I find a book is written because of a perceived gap in the knowledge that's out there. So I'm curious, what led you to write this book?
Spot on. I was inspired because there's so much brilliance around mindfulness. The Mindfulness Revolution is amazing. And I've been writing this current for a really long time. I've been involved in studies, which, by the way, now there's 17,000. It's amazing. So the Mindfulness Revolution is extraordinary. But I think there's some forgotten issues here and some gaps because, as I try to point out in this book, mindfulness at its fruition sedates. It doesn't liberate. And sedation is great in a world that's all stressed out, in a world that's on fire. Chilling out is a fantastic thing. But if you think that chilling out is the fruition, there's so much more. And so the subtitle of the book, of course, is Moving Beyond Mindfulness to Meet the Modern World. And so as a really long time dedicated meditator, including the dozens and dozens of meditations I did in my 3-year retreat, it was like, wait a second, there's so much more than mindfulness. And so I got excited about, we got to show people, maybe introduce them to the wonders of the mind, everything that really transcends but includes mindfulness. So that's what really drove me to write the book.
Yeah, and I'm curious, since you've been in this world for a long time, what do you think where do you think that undercurrent of the focus on the feel-good, mindfulness-only focus comes from?
I think it's actually inherent in the practice itself. I guess that's what I'm trying to point out, that mindfulness is beautiful. Don't get me wrong. I'm not dissing it at all. I'm simply, in a more systemic, holistic, integral approach, just trying to situate it, localize it within a large spectrum of meditation. Because again, just to backpedal a little bit, when we talk about meditation, like, what are you talking about? It's like sports. When you say sports, there are hundreds of sports. When we talk about meditation, people tend to conflate meditation with mindfulness, but mindfulness is just one of countless different types of practices. And the problem really isn't so much mindfulness itself. Again, it has a magnificent contribution to make, but it can be a kind of metaphysical Valium at a certain point. It can just basically, and I can be very specific and technical about states of mind that it can lead you into that can become actually somewhat problematic as these really subtle, juicy spiritual traps, psychospiritual traps. So mindfulness itself is brilliant, it's fantastic, but there's so much more than just the tranquility of this practice. So I endorse it categorically. It's unbelievable, the benefits here, but there are shadow sides, the pejorative. I think there's some credibility to that. I think the over-infatuation with the sedative qualities of meditation dramatically limits mindfulness, I should say, dramatically limits the scope of meditation altogether. And so the book is an absolute endorsement of the majesty of mindfulness and the Mindfulness Revolution. But I also think a healthy critique, a way, again, to transcend it, but include it. And so that's what the book does. We include mindfulness as a platform, but then transcend it with these, dozen or so other practices that are written in the book.
I appreciate this word integral too, because you're not saying for people to leave mindfulness, you're saying to integrate it into all these other beautiful paths that you've laid out.
That's the key. That's super important. So this is the Hegelian notion from the philosopher, German idealist Hegel, basically transcend, but include. you got it. It's like growing from age 18 to age 19. But you don't kill age 18. You transcend it, but you include it. And so there again, I bow to the majesty of this incredible, noble mindfulness tradition. Amazing. But boy, there's so much more, right? I'm practicing while you're sleeping and dreaming, practicing in intense, unwanted experiences, all the ways to work with your heart, all the ways to work with the deeper dimensions of your brain. There's just so much more than what mindfulness really has to offer.
Yeah. Yeah, that's one of the things I really appreciate about Buddhism is that at first it seems like it's a path, like a linear path, like you do step 1, then step 2 and step 3. But then you start to realize every step of the way is holographic and it drops into this whole other world. And then you can practice something like the jhanas, and then you come back and then you're practicing vipassana in this whole new way.
That's such a great comment, Michael. That's spot on. So spot on. Because, and again, I riff on this a little bit in the book, is that these practices, they're not all mutually exclusive. So on one level, yes, there seems to be this intimation that mindfulness is this particular kind of bandwidth of working with mind and heart. And there's some truth to that. But basically, in fact, you are working with your mind and heart with all these different meditations regardless. And so this is also another important interjection, is that by transcending your mindfulness, you'll actually find yourself enhancing it. Because I've always learned this with my meditations. I don't know if it's been your experience, but like when I do the next practice or I learn another practice, it helps me understand the earlier practice. Like I do calculus 2, it helps me understand calculus 1. And so this is also really a pleasant surprise about these post-mindfulness or meta meditation. And I always have to playfully say here, like with a caveat, whatever you can do, I can do meta, right? So everything is meta, right? And so I'm going to do all these meta meditations. The really beautiful thing I've discovered is, okay, I do my mindfulness practice and I do my insight, I do my analytic meditation, I do my meta. Oh my gosh, my mindfulness is getting richer. It just enhances it. So by transcending it and including it, it's also transcend and enhance. And so that's also really beautiful because, let's say I'm doing analytic meditation, vipassana, or I'm doing a meta. It's like mindfulness is completely embedded. It's ensconced within that because my mind works in these kind of bandwidths of expression, no matter what I'm doing. And so if you understand more of the spectrum of the mind, practices that work with it, then you actually augment all the practices, this triangulation thing. You basically work with all these different aspects, facets of the diamond-like nature of your being. And so the pleasant surprise of a book like this is you go through it, you explore all these different kind of meta or post-mindfulness practices, and you realize, hey, wait a second, my mindfulness is really getting better here. Mm-hmm. So that's the other really important thing. Again, to honor this extraordinary ancient practice.
And I love this book because it's all text. There's no images, but for me, it was very visual. I could see this map of these points being interconnected. And at certain points, you do talk about, like in the Nocturnal meditations, a sort of depth of practice that one can do. But I wanted to start with the body, because this is a place where I think a lot of Western meditators miss it. They think, okay, meditation is happening from the neck up, and my body is just here to help me practice and develop mindfulness. So could you talk a bit about the importance of the body?
Yeah, this is a really good one. You're hitting on the sweet spots here. It's super important because if you don't bring your body along on the path, good luck, right? It's going to catch. And so this points out a number of really interesting issues. One is the potential for classic spiritual bypassing, right? John Wellwood's famous contribution that we tend to think of mindfulness as being a mental thing. And that you're basically just going to be working with this kind of cognitive cerebral aspect of your being. Minds are always embodied. It's impossible to talk about a disembodied mind. And bringing the body along with you is critical. In fact, I would argue, and there's some really sophisticated backing from Western researchers and also the great wisdom traditions, the tantric traditions, teachings of Saraha, wisdom abides in the body, that the real journey of awakening, waking up, is really the journey of waking down. It's about dropping into the wisdom that's inherent in your body. Because if we get into these kind of spiritual bypass trajectories, your body's going to come calling eventually. It's going to come back and say, what about me? And so working with the body is extraordinarily impactful. And in fact, it's one of the great contributions of Tantra. Now, I don't talk a lot about Tantra in this book because, again, there's only so much. This is a whole different bandwidth of practices. But in the tantric traditions, the body is as important as the mind. And so what I try to point out in this book, this is connected, just to give you some kind of doctrinal support for it. Spinoza talked about this kind of dual aspect monism. It's a big, fancy philosophical term, but it's an important one, because one way to extrapolate upon his insights is that you can really look at mind and body along a spectrum. And again, this is part of this integral systemic holistic approach that I try to bring about. And so to riff a little bit on this philosophical idea is you can really look at mind as very subtle body, and body is really gross mind. And so if you have this deep understanding, then you can work in a kind of bidirectional or interstate way to engage, for instance, things like yoga, the incredible power of the yogic traditions, whether it's the yoga studio around the corner or the really deep inner yoga practices associated with Kundalini and the esoteric Tibetan things. Basic idea here is you can work with one to help you understand the other. And so this is a really important issue in my experience, because I have therapist friends. It's the most amazing thing. I have body workers who often tell me that some of the most disembodied and neurotic people that come into them are, in fact, the meditators. Isn't that amazing? The meditators who basically think that, somehow this escapist thing matter is the problem. Samsara materialism and form is the problem. I got to FedEx my consciousness out of this. Oh, goodness, no. Well, the whole idea is you pull a U-turn, literally turn into your body, use the wisdom of your body. And it's not to say that mindfulness doesn't acknowledge this. The very first foundation of mindfulness is mindfulness of body. But boy, that gets pretty quickly lost, in my opinion. So I really try to emphasize that, because especially when you start to do really deep inner work, and here again, just to give you some backing, when you start working deeply with your unconscious mind, Candace Pert, the psychoneuroimmunologist out of NIH, she unequivocally proclaimed your body is your unconscious mind. And boy, you better bring it along with you. Otherwise, welcome to therapy, welcome to dysfunction, welcome to pathology. So to me, this whole notion of embodiment, and it's so critical, I'll end on this, it's so critical in the Buddhist tradition that when they talk about the journey to awakening, they talk about what are called the three body principles, literally Trikaya. The highest body, allegedly, people think is what's called the Dharmakaya, the highest formless dimension. People think, that's where I need to go. I need to go to this formless dimension of being. Then they forget about what are called the Rupakayas, the form kayas, the Sambhogakaya and Nirmanakaya in Sanskrit. And basically what constitutes awakening, this is totally resonant with the Spinoza thing I just mentioned, is not thinking that somehow the Dharmakaya is supreme, or if you like Hindu terms, this would be Turiya, thinking you're going to transcend into that state, the ultimate witness. Whether it's Turiya, maturing into Turiyatita, and forgive some of these Sanskrit terms, or the Trikayas being realized as the ultimate integration of the Trikayas, called the Svabhavakaya, you have to include all dimensions of your being, and that includes your soma, that includes your body, because otherwise your body will come calling.
Yeah. Yeah, Bessel van der Kolk says, the body keeps score.
Spot on. Yeah, his work has been such a marvelous contribution here. So it's completely resonant with his work, which has been a bestseller for 5 years. Amazing.
It would seem too that developing mindfulness of the body is, if there was a sort of path in your book, that it would seem like that would be the next or the first step to go to from classic mindfulness, would be develop some sort of mindfulness of the body, because that will lead you through a gateway to other things like metta or compassion-based practices.
Beautiful. Again, spot on. Exactly. Because that's where emotions are felt. That's actually where life takes place. That's where transformation takes place. Really think about this. Are we really transformed when we think about things? As much as I like to read about quantum theory and philosophy and all these wonderful heady sorts of things, is that really going to change me? Not really. I change when I feel things. I change when something is registered in my soma. And so you hit it again right on the mark. When you work with mindfulness of body fully, you drop really deep into yourself. And this is a little bit in line with the Taoist yin yang thing. You bring something to its fruition. In other words, here you go so fully into your body, you will find your spirit there. You will find your mind there. Now, this is really important excuse me, in a larger overarching sense. Because otherwise, if we have this somewhat disembodied relationship to our soma, like we do in meditation, this is the near enemy of meditation altogether. This can bring about a kind of an anti-materialistic approach, an anti-embodied approach. And that's not to say that materialism shouldn't be tempered, but what I'm trying to point out here is that if we can't actually go fully into matter, fully into form, fully into our bodies, and discover spirit, liberation, and freedom there, what then does that do to spirit? What does that do to our bodies, to matter? I got to get away from it. This is somehow the source of some negative aspects of Christianity and other traditions, saying the body is the problem. No, it's not. Inappropriate relationship to the body is the problem. And so if you want to discover the immediacy of the awakened space, the immediacy of fruitional meditation states, realize that full embodiment is where this recognition can take place. And so this is lovely because this also then brings about a deeper connection to the planet at large, because our bodies are our personal planets. And so part of the reason we have this meta crisis going on in relationship to the globe altogether on the earth is because we have a disembodied relationship to our own soma. So the way we relate to the body at large, the planet, is iterative of the way we relate to our own bodies. So not only is this inward bound, waking down trajectory integral for a complete meditation, it's also integral for a more sophisticated relationship to our natural world, which, if we don't repair that, it goes without saying, we're in deep trouble. So this is a really important point all the way across. It goes into deep metaphysical principles. It goes into relationship to ecology, to nature, to everything that's happening. Exclamation point on that one.
Yeah, I'm feeling this in my body right now as you're saying this. When I've heard people teaching metta, the classic thing is bring to mind a negative person, bring to mind a neutral person. And I almost feel like it should be like to experience them in your body, like feel in your heart what it means to connect to the neutral person at the supermarket or a pet or a loved one, to really get the juiciness and the energy of loving kindness as a meditative practice.
Yeah, this is, again, you're hitting the really important ones here because, and again, the wisdom traditions are aware of this, right? So in both Pali and Sanskrit, what is the word for mind? It's the same word as heart. So chitta. So really, when you talk about mindfulness, and again, in a complete sense, you're talking equally about heartfulness. So every time you use the word mind, it really should be mind/heart. And again, if you want to take it even a step further, because where is your heart? It's your body. So it should be mind, heart, body. This is now you're talking about complete meditation. Now you're talking about complete integrated spirituality, bringing all three of these aspects along with one path.
One of the interesting parts of the book, and I actually heard you talk about the reverse meditations on Michael Taft's podcast.
Oh, yeah.
Could you describe those for the listeners? Because I feel like that this is a revelatory for me to hear about these practices.
Yeah, it's interesting. Just a little bit of an inside story here. I wrote these two books simultaneously. And my initial aspiration was actually, I wrote the I'm Mindful Now book first. That was the first book, because I wanted to introduce and situate the reverse meditations, which I'll unpack in a second, within that context. But then my publisher, we got to kind of get this reverse meditation book out first. And so it was funny. I had to completely flip my whole strategy, finish the second book first, and then come back and finish this one. And interesting, there was like a little reverse flip on my part, right?
Reversing the reverse.
Yeah, reversing the whole thing. The reverse meditations are, I think, one of the juicier contributions in this book. I'm mindful about what. Because, boy, if you really want to accelerate your meditation, put it in reverse. And by this, what I mean is the reverse meditations, and this comes from the traditions. For those who want, again, the doctrinal basis, that comes from one of the most elevated schools of Tibetan Buddhism called the Mahamudra. So I didn't make this practice up. What I did is add water to it, so to speak, unpack it, apply it, and expand it to the modern life. And so to me, this set of practices has been a total game changer because it's a way to bring unwanted experiences onto the path. That which previously interfered with your meditation now enhances it. That which was previously an obstacle now becomes an opportunity. And so therefore, the reverse meditations are a really powerful way to bring everything onto your meditative. And this includes physical pain. This includes emotional hardship. Anything that you would previously deem almost anti-meditative, anti-spiritual, now really in a kind of alchemical from the Western approach or tantric from an Eastern approach way, allows you to transform that lead into gold, the poison into the medicine. And I have a lot of passion for these, Michael, because I've used them. Like I was diagnosed with kidney stones several times, which are among the most painful things you can imagine. I also went through a really challenging kind of prostate cancer situation a couple of years ago. These practices, these reverse meditations were a lifesaver for me. And I'm not speaking as an armchair philosophizer here. I was working as a dental surgeon for decades. That was my career. So I'm well versed in the clinical pathophysiology of pain. I've been involved in meditative pain studies. I know a little bit about pain. I've written tens of thousands of prescriptions. And so I'm not just sitting here saying, oh, do this thing and it's going to take care. So I bring these reverse meditations in an integral perspective yet again to bring them in the context of all these other viable approaches to working with unwanted experiences. But these things, boy, they've been everything to me. So I'll just very briefly mention the 4 steps. We can go into these to any degree that you want. And that'll tell you about how I work with these on a daily basis. So there are 4 stages to the reverse practice. You can stop at any stage depending on how it works for you. The first stage is observe whatever discomfort it is. So let's just take physical pain because that everybody knows what that feels like. It's pretty universal. So step 1 is observe it, the observational phase. You're just basically establishing a new relationship. That's what meditation fundamentally is across the board, about establishing a new heightened relationship to your mind and to reality. So step 1 is observe it. You can get perspective on it. You distance yourself a little bit from it. But a near enemy of step 1 is if you observe too much, you can just want to run away and run out. So step 2 is you observe it. Step 2 is you be with it. So you pull the U-turn, you come alongside now, and you become more curious. You land next to the pain. You allow yourself again to drop back into your body. So this is why it's deeply connected to the somatic part. So let's say you're feeling some pain in your foot. So you bring your awareness alongside that pain, and you simply allow yourself to be with it without commentary. It's not so easy to do that. Without wanting to get rid of it, without indulging it, without repressing it, you simply be with it. That alone starts to transform it. That leads very elegantly to the 3rd step, examine it. And so now what you do is you become more curious. Okay, what is the nature? What is this pain really? What is pain made of? And so this investigation is also a game changer because not merely is it this kind of intellectual, cerebral thing, because of step 2, it's also a somatic investigation. So you're allowing your body to investigate your body. You're actually working with what really is this thing called pain that I spend my life trying to avoid. So that leads to the 4th and really most elegant phase where the practice then really can become truly spiritual, which is the uniting or yoking phase. And so this is where you do the complete opposite of what you would normally do. This is really the culmination of a reverse strategy. Instead of running away, you go directly in and you literally try to become one with the pain. So this creates the acronym, observe it, be with it, examine it, yoke. That means the acronym is obey a new order of relationship. And so just briefly, step 4 is different from step 2 because step 2 is being with the pain. Step 4 is being the pain. And so here's the game changer on this one, then I'll pause, is that, and I invite people again, hey, don't take my word for it. Check it out. See if it works for you. See if this is not, in fact, the case. By becoming one with your pain, and this is where it becomes spiritual, by becoming one with your pain, there's no one to hurt. Wow. Okay, what's left? That's what you get to see for yourself. This is a demolition derby meditation. It deconstructs our relationship. Actually, it deconstructs not only our relationship, it deconstructs suffering back into pain. What is suffering is nothing more than an inappropriate relationship to pain. Let me say that again. In the form of an equation, I have this little goofy equation, right? S equals P times R. Suffering equals pain times resistance, right? Pain and suffering are not the same thing. With the reverse strategy, you reverse your resistance. That deconstructs the suffering back into pain. And then you can go even deeper and deconstruct pain into what it actually really truly is, which is nothing more than intense sensory awareness. And so I can spit this out in 10 minutes, and it may be of some intellectual interest, but it's when you sit down and actually do the practice and really start to play with it, this changes everything. So when I had my really intense kidney stones, this is like way up there in pain, I said, okay, let's practice what I preach. I go in, I roll down it. First time I got hit with it in the middle of the night, unbelievable pain. It's like, should I go to the ER? It's the middle of the night. They're not going to be able to do anything. So I go down to my meditation room, I curl up, and I allow myself to just, it didn't happen right away, to just plunge completely into my pain. And I was able to do that after a few moments. And here's the key. It didn't necessarily feel good. There was still something there. It didn't necessarily feel good, but here's the kicker. It also didn't feel bad. It just felt real, super real, intense sensory awareness. And this changes everything, especially like on a more common basis, heartbreak. Let's just say briefly, your lover just left you, you just got fired, you're feeling tremendous emotional duress. Instead of distracting yourself with the usual mechanisms, armed with the skill set, you are invited to go as fully as you possibly can into that emotionality. And again, tying it back into the body, where do you feel all this stuff? In your body. In the book, when I talk about the reverse meditations, it's a little bit more advanced part of the book because you have all this preparatory stuff, like already learning how to relate to the body, to work to the body in this way. So that when you get to this point, it's, hey, okay, I've got a more sophisticated relationship to my soma now, to my body. And so the amazing thing is this, again, there's so many wonderful surprises with this stuff, is you will literally, both physically and emotionally, you will feel things more, but they'll hurt you less. Let me say that again. You will feel things more. It brings you more into life. You're more alive. You're more awake. You're more emotional in the best sense of that term, not hysterically, but more real. But it hurts you less because there's less of you involved in that. So these practices, boy, these are the ones that really get me excited because they have so much applicability in this day and age of duress and strife and discord. Well, I use these sets of practices literally on a daily basis.
Yeah, I've never had any serious medical pain, let's say, but I've explored these practices not knowing about your framework beforehand when getting tattooed. I have tattoos all over my arms, and the guy who did a lot of my tattoos, also a spiritual guy, more in the tantric tradition. But he said, just breathe and explore the pain. And that's what I did. And like you said, at first there's a revulsion, like you want to pull away from it and it's burning and you can't believe it. But you start to just really, like you said, become one with the pain. And you start to really feel these nuances like, oh, this is actually feels like cold water. Okay, this actually feels like electricity. And you start to ride through these waves of experience where it's not traditional, ow, that hurt, get away from me. But in that particular example, it's a very controlled, safe pain, let's say. I know that I'm not going to die necessarily from it, or maybe the worst thing could happen, maybe I'll pass out. I would think that people who are experiencing pain where the thinking mind is creating stories and saying, what is this? Is this cancer? Am I going to die? What do I have to do? So how do you work with this technique and balance that thinking, catastrophizing mind that doesn't want to be with the pain because they want to figure out what can I do next if this gets worse.
Yeah, totally. So this is why these practices are a little bit more advanced. And this is why they take a little bit of familiarity. It's an interesting term, the very definition of meditation in the Tibetan language. The word is gom, G-O-M, literally means to become familiar with. That's what meditation means in the Tibetan world. So it takes a little while to become familiar with this practice, especially as you were suggesting, it goes against the grain of both nurture and nature, right? Our bodies just say it hurts, get away, right? Emotionally, it hurts, gets away. So again, in a proper integral framework, we need our pain, we need our fear, we need all these physical, so-called unwanted experiences for evolutionary purposes. If we didn't have pain, we wouldn't be here talking about the nature of pain, right? So there's this evolutionary driver that has brought us to this point, but it becomes a devolutionary retardant. And so in relationship, if we don't change our relationship, in relationship to this, when you're having these experiences, you're allowing yourself to relate to the confabulation, to the catastrophizing, because as you're invited more deeply into your body, you will notice the invitation to be so embodied. You will notice your habit patterns to, in fact, be disembodied, to escape, to get out. Wow, this is amazing. I can't even handle a whit of discomfort. And so I write about this in the reverse meditation section of the book, about how it is that perhaps our inability to be uncomfortable with heat and our infatuation with air conditioning is actually accelerating global warming. Because God forbid we be a little bit uncomfortable this day and age. Where in the life contract does it say life is supposed to feel good? Show me, bring out your spiritual attorney and show me where in this life contract it says life is supposed to feel good. It isn't. It's supposed to feel real. And so because we're so pampered, especially in the West, everything's got to be as part of our comfort plan. If it doesn't fit our comfort plan, we're out of here. So the great gift of this practice is, I write about this several times in the book, these different practices create respective heightened contrast mediums. This is an important interjection because so much of what brings about our suffering and discord is we don't see, or this is real insight or lack of insight. We don't, for instance, when we sit in meditation, and you'll see how this ties in, we sit in meditation, the stillness and stasis of our body allows us to see the movement of our minds. That creates a new contrast medium that allows us to bring about the insight/Vipassana component that allows us to see, wow, I never realized I had so many thoughts before, right? Because they were lost in the active busyness and active laziness of your life. You practice like open awareness. I write about that in the book. This is another really big one. You're learning how to keep your mind open. That creates a contrast medium to show you how contracted you are. So these practices are both diagnostic and prescriptive. And so now what happens here with the reverse meditations is by inviting you to go into your body, it creates yet a new contrast medium. It shows you our extraordinary propensity to constantly have out-of-body experiences. So it's like what James Joyce said. I love this, the great Irish writer. Mr. Duffy lived a short distance from his body, right? We are all Mr. and Mrs. Duffy. We're constantly having out-of-body experiences, right? And therefore, tongue-in-cheek, we wonder why something is missing. We're the ones that go AWOL on reality. We're the ones that are missing in action. So these practices, the reverse meditation, invites you into your body. You realize that, boy, I don't want to stay with this. This does not feel good. So what do? You start to now see this kind of microphenomenology. You start to see your mind working in a more refined way. This is amazing. I can't tolerate any discord. I have to run up to my storylines. I have to run up to my narratives. I have to run up to my distraction therapy. And then this is the real irony. As we run away from it, we actually paradoxically exacerbate it. So trying to get away from it, this can actually make it feel worse. And so you were talking about with your tattoo experience or other unwanted experiences, reversing that strategy, exploring it on your terms in this kind of titrated 4-step way. This changes everything again. It allows you to see and feel and you realize, wow, this is amazing. My conceptual mind, this nurture of my culture that tells me pain is completely wrong and unwanted, this sometimes doesn't serve me. And so basically the kind of meta crisis in terms of emotionality, hypersensitivity, and all that is also laid bare, brought into awareness. And then you start to relate to it better. You can't solve, the first problem in solving a problem is realizing you have a problem. You can't solve a problem you don't even know you had. So if you realize, wow, this is amazing. I can't stay with any discord for even a microsecond. Maybe I want to look at that. Maybe I want to take a look. John Kabat-Zinn, his MBSR work is incredibly impactful here. So on one level, reverse meditations are a little bit like MBSR on steroids. It takes that whole incredible contribution that John brought about and just ramps it up to bring it into emotionality and other vectors in life, which in this day and age, when there's so much pain, so much discord, so much duress, these skill sets are no small thing.
Yeah, a lot of wisdom in that. Thinking about, like you said, our culture's aversion to even the most minuscule of discomfort or pain. And often we do things like we take our phone out and we're scrolling and we don't even really know why. And it wasn't even like a conscious thought that triggered it. It's just a subconscious sort of pain or an echo of something in us. And we're just completely unaware of it. We just go right for the response. We don't even know what the trigger.
And this is important, Michael, because this is what's getting worse. We're in the Kali Yuga, right? The dark age. And what makes the dark age so dark is its insidious manifestation. And that's distraction. So another way to talk about almost everything we've been pinging on for the last 40 minutes, underneath it all is this hyperpathology of distraction. So when we pull away from the present moment, literally to distract means to pull apart. We're pulling away from reality. When we pull away from emotional duress, it's a form of distraction. When we addict ourselves with entertainment, it's a form of distraction. And so I argue that what actually constitutes the meta crisis is nothing more than distraction upon distraction, a meta fracturing, because every time you distract, you're literally breaking. You're breaking apart from the present moment. And so the essence of spiritual practice is remembrance. So when you work with the present moment in mindfulness, the genius of mindfulness is healing because it's putting a cast on the present moment, allowing the distracted mind to heal. And so all these other practices work exactly along those same lines. They work to solve the crisis and the meta crisis of whether it's pain or literally what we know is the meta crisis of reality, which I don't think this is too much of an exaggeration. This is an iterative or fractal expression of our inability to be in the present moment. And so we distraction upon distraction. We're so out of touch with ourselves, our bodies, the planet, with each other. No surprise, this world is in such a crisis. And so the genius of these meditations that these practices bring about is they return you to the reduction base. They can take you back. If the essence of samsara and the meta crisis is distraction and forgetfulness, the essence of spiritual practice and nirvana and healing is remembrance. Healing, holing, integration is remembering. So an underlying narrative to all these meditations is in fact this narrative of healing, holing, and integration. So I'm glad you brought that out because otherwise, this is again what makes the dark age so dark is its insidious manifestation, which is distraction. And all you've heard the term, all the weapons of mass distraction, the phones, the light sources, everything just keeps pulling us farther and farther away from the present moment. It's like an MIT researcher said, with our cell phones, we are forever elsewhere. We're never really in the present moment. And then we wonder why something is missing. Nothing missing in reality, man. What's missing is your full embodied participation in reality. That's what's missing. So if you make that diagnosis, now you have the prescription. If the diagnosis is distraction, fracturing, and meta-fracturing, what's the prescription? Reversing that, right? So there's another instance of the reverse practice. You heal, you integrate, you whole through all these different vectors of remembrance.
Yeah, our awareness is the most precious thing we have, I think, and we give it away so easily these days.
It's not the most precious thing, Michael. It's the only thing we have. I don't want to go too philosophical here, but take a very close look using your insight meditation The only thing you ever have is awareness. The only thing you ever have is experience. Hard stop. That's it. And these practices lead you to that realization. And as I write in the latter part of the book, this is the great cash value, the practicality of these practices. They're incredibly simplifying. In the last part of the book, I write about the wonder of the mind and how it is that if you really take a very close look at your experience through the practices of insight meditation and analytic meditation that I write about in the book, you will discover, I promise you this. You just have to do a little bit of investigation. You are always working with your mind. You're always working with awareness, your heart. Why? Because that's all there is. Period. Hard stop. And so if you really get this, wow, this is like what Thoreau said. This is why he went to Walden Pond, right? To drive life into a corner and reduce it to its lowest terms. What are the lowest terms? You are always working with your mind because there's nothing else, even philosophically, idealism. There's only mind. So if you understand that, oh my gosh, is this a game changer? You're looking for, let's say, I give you these examples. This is really important. You're really looking for, let's say, fame. I want to be famous, right? Take a really good look at this. What are you really looking for when you're looking for fame? You're looking for an experience to which you append the label fame. You're looking for a state of mind. Okay, I hadn't thought of that. Okay, power. I want power, right? I want some power. All right, what are you really looking for? Power is an experience. It's a state of mind. It's not a state in reality. Oh, geez. Wow, that's interesting. Okay, how about money? Money's got to be different. I want money. What are you after when you get money? Fame and power and materialism and acquisition. What does money really buy you? You may think that it buys you a car. Provisionally it does or whatever. But what you're really buying, what you really want is an experience. You want a particular state of mind. That's what these objects bring about. And so because we conflate that with the object, right here is the basis of consumerism and materialism and the destruction of the planet. So I'm going to say this a couple times because this is a big one. You think you're happy when you get what you want. Take a really close look. That's really what's happening? No. You're really happy because you stopped wanting. We confuse the satisfaction of want with its temporary transcendence. Let me say that again. This will bankrupt the entire world economy. We confuse the satisfaction of desire with its temporary transcendence. We think we're happy when we get what we want, but we're actually happy because in that moment we've stopped wanting. But because we don't know that, what do? We keep wanting. Consumerism, materialism, the destruction of the planet. Average American consumes 200 times the world's average of natural resources. Why? Because they don't understand them. Forgive them, Father, for they know not what they do. So you engage in these practices. Oh yeah, meditation was cool. I did this retreat. It was neat. Oh man, you get into this stuff properly. This changes everything. Because now you've gone to the reduction base. What are you doing with your life? What are you doing with literally everything you think you want and you're doing in your life? You're working with your mind and your heart. Why not work with your mind and heart directly? That's what meditation is all about. Why not transcend your meditation, your mindfulness, to include all these other practices? And then not only will you save this from yourself, you're going to save this planet because you're going to realize you fundamentally already have everything you could possibly want because you have a mind and a heart. And if you get that, you don't think that's going to change your life? So this is why, this is the most beautiful story, and I'll pause. I get so excited about this because this is the fruition of the whole book. This amazing story that Richie Davidson, the esteemed neuroscientist, writes about to talk about cash value here, right? So he's hanging out with the Dalai Lama. He's good buds with His Holiness. And they get on this, somebody asked him the question. I don't know if it was Richie who asked him the question. He goes, His Holiness, he goes, what's the happiest moment of your life? What was the happiest moment of your life? His Holiness pauses for about 10 seconds and says, I think right now. I think right now. Wow, what an insight. We think we're happy when we go to the beach in Hawaii. We think we're happy, fill in the blank, when we get this, X, Y, Z, or whatever. That's only because at that moment, there's a temporary cessation of the contraction of desire. His Holiness and other great realized meditation masters are happy all the time. Why? Because they've simply ceased contracting. They're no longer desiring anything. They realize the mind, the heart, reality is already full and replete. So this cannot be overstated, because otherwise it's like meditation is relegated to this new age section of the bookstore. Where's the cash value? How does that apply to reality and to my life? You take this to heart, kick the tires, check it out, test it. This changes everything. And it vastly simplifies your life, vastly reduces the complexity of your life. This is the essence of healthy reductionism, is reducing the complex to the simple. And so you take these teachings, you can conquer this incredibly complex world, this meta everything, with these incredibly foundational fundamental principles. And I cannot overstate this enough. That's one reason you mentioned at the outset why I wrote this book. On a fruitional level, this is why I wrote the book. Take your analytic meditation and introduce in this book. Look very closely at your pain, at your experience, at anything. And then you come back to me and tell me if the principles I just talked about in the last 10 minutes don't apply.
Lovely. It's encapsulating too the first three of the noble truths of Buddhism too. You talk about suffering and the end of suffering, and letting go of desire and craving is the path for letting go of that suffering.
That's why not all, but in particular Buddhism, it's a tradition I have the most familiarity. The terms of an awakening are terms of negation, right? Nirvana, nirodha, nirguna. It's the path, like what did Meister Eckhart say from the Christian tradition? The soul does not grow by addition, but by subtraction. It's not consumerism. It's more purging, more letting go, releasing. And so, yeah, it's just so simple on these levels. Simple doesn't mean easy, but fundamentally, it's an incredibly simple journey. It brings about unconditional happiness, not just conditional happiness that's brought about when certain conditions are met and X, Y, and Z are in your life, and then you append that experience, you call that happiness. Then you become a slave to external circumstance. That's what we are. We're all slaves to external circumstance, our comfort point. This book is about unconditional happiness, reverse meditation. How can you be happy when your world's going to hell? How can you be happy under these previously really unwanted experiences? How can you find contentment and say, like His Holiness did, the most happy moment? Right now. That's by enhancing your understanding of happiness. What does it really mean? What really brings it about? Oh my goodness, you don't think this is a game changer? It changes everything.
Awesome. Okay, how do I transition to the nocturnal meditations from this? Because I want to ask about...
Sure.
And I know we don't have time to go into the whole scope because it's a huge topic, and maybe you can come back another time and we can just talk about the nocturnal meditations. But as someone who's read your Dream Yoga book and who has practiced these things for a long time, I was really delighted to see this in here, because I think this is, again, one of these things that's really going to light up for some people who have done mindfulness and maybe have an interest in dreams, but to realize, hey, I can be mindful 24 hours a day, and this is a practice that doesn't just rely on me being awake.
Yeah, totally. And I actually like your language there when you talk about people will light up, because that's exactly what these practices of lucidity are about. The lucidity is a practice of light. It's a practice of awareness. So yeah, I don't know, this is one of my favorite topics too, right? I've written 3 books on this. I riff on this stuff all the time. I love this stuff. So let me just briefly share just what these 5 practices are. And this again is a magnificent way to take your mindfulness and extend it to now domains that we would previously consider to be almost like completely inaccessible to anything resembling the mind or the meditative mind. So basically there are 5 of these practices, and these are nocturnal meditation is my languaging, my neologism. the mapping of the 5 practices, or that's the way I relate to these practices. But I think they hold some traction. And so the first one is called liminal dreaming. I'll mention them and then I'll say briefly what they are, just briefly. So the 5 practices are liminal dreaming, lucid dreaming, dream yoga, sleep yoga, which is connected to what's called yoga nidra, the Sanskrit world. And then the last one, bardo yoga. And so let me just briefly say these. So liminal dreaming is the first of the 5. Liminality is, the word literally means threshold. And it relates to this kind of pre and post sleep and dream phase, when your head first hits the pillow and before you fall asleep, or when you wake up in the morning and you're not out of bed yet. Those are these kind of really fascinating kind of plasma dimensions of mind. When you're not quite awake, you're not quite asleep, you're not quite here, you're not quite there. And liminality is a fantastic new addition to the night school curriculum. So I think of all 5 of these meditations as a type of night school. And if you have the interest, I can give you some scientific backing around this using some basic neuroscience and neuroanatomy. Actually, why I really think it's not an exaggeration, and some scientists support me on this, to talk about these nocturnal meditations as a form of hyperpedagogy, as they're literally representing a kind of pedagogical approach to the future. I think there's some real traction to that. But liminality cultivates the ability to take your mindfulness from the day and extend it into the night. And so instead of just crashing out mindlessly, you bring your mindfulness into that liminal space and you start to explore it. And it is incredibly interesting. It's a seat of so much creativity. Thomas Edison, Salvador Dali, and a host of others devised very clever ways to control that liminal space, because you're basically starting to dip from the conscious to the unconscious mind. That's where the whole bandwidth of creativity comes from. And so you can learn so much about the narrative structure of reality here. You mentioned earlier the storylines and the narratives and catastrophizing and confabulating. Whoa, this is an arena where you can actually see the narrative structure of your world, yourself, your sense of self, and a reality that co-emerges with that world. You can see that narrative structure come undone as you fall asleep in the liminal practices. And then you can see how this narrative starts back up and your world is reconstructed through a narrative structure when you wake up in the morning. So that in itself, and this is a unique contribution of liminal dreaming. It's the easiest of the 5, and it is really interesting and really profound. You start to see that everything is fundamentally a story. Everything is a story, super glued together by ego. And so as ego comes undone, you can start to see how ego creates this. So one other last thing, and I say a little bit about this because this is something people can work with, like tonight. So you're going to sleep, so work with this. So you lie down. Usually it's thinking. You bring your mindfulness in. You go, wow, yeah, just like thinking. You pay attention with your mindfulness. You'll notice that the thoughts transform into little images. You're no longer thinking. You're more imaging, picturing. You're actually starting to transition from thinking to imaging. That's going to then mature into dreaming. So liminal dreaming serves as a form of lucid sleep onset. It helps you with both lucid dreaming and dream yoga. So the really cool thing is you watch it. You develop this kind of witnessing capacity to observe your mind, courtesy of mindfulness. And you start to notice, and scientists talk about this, thought image. It's called thought image amalgamation. So thinking turns into imaging, thought image amalgamation. And then imaging eventually then inflates into a small, literally brief lucid dream. It's a dreamlet. It's a very brief 5 to 10 second lucid dream where you can actually see how a thought can seed a 5 or 10 second little lucid dream. One last thing about this, and then I'll move quickly through the other 4. Another reason to play with liminal dreaming is it helps you work with liminality altogether, liminal principles. It helps you understand liminal places, which are places of transition in a new way, where you feel a little unsettled, workplaces after hours, hallways, empty auditoriums, places like that, empty parking lots. They feel a little bit uneasy because you're not quite here, you're not quite there. That's a liminal space. Liminal experience is come back from a trip. You're not quite home. You're still part of your trip. You're not having a ride. That's a liminal space. In a waiting room for someone who's coming out of surgery, liminal space. Transitioning into the dying dimension, that's a liminal space. And so liminal beings, LGBTQ plus individuals are liminal beings. They don't quite fit the standard model. Those are liminal creative types, artists, esoteric, mystical people are liminal beings. Little proficiency with that, transition into lucid dreaming. Lots of literature here. Magical state where you're dreaming. Something clues you into the fact that you're dreaming. You go, oh my gosh, this is just a dream. So you maintain or attain consciousness, awareness in the dream. You're aware that you're dreaming while you're still in the dream. That's lucid dreaming. Used principally for psychological purposes, self-fulfillment, an incredible array of unbelievable benefits. With a little bit of facility there, and you'll see how all these practices, they follow this narrative, as does my entire book, of what Hegel talked about, the philosopher, of transcend but include. I think I used this term earlier, I can't recall. This ties into the whole notion that we transcend mindfulness, but we include it with everything that we do. The same narrative applies to these practices. Lucid dreaming transcends but includes liminal dreaming. Dream yoga transcends but includes the previous two. With some facility in lucid dreaming, you mature into dream yoga. But that practice now becomes not so much psychological, but now it's spiritual practice. Now it's not so much about self-fulfillment. It's about self-transcendence. It's about using the dream arena to wake up in the spiritual sense. 9 stages there, so much to say, but for brevity, with a little facility, you transition then into the 4th practice. Now you're entering graduate school. This is the luminosity yoga, sleep yoga, also called connected to yoga nidra. This is where you attain, it may seem unbelievable, but it's been asserted by the traditions, and I can tell you from my own experience, you attain lucidity, awareness in the deep dreamless state. This has not been scientifically proven yet, but a number of labs around the world are studying it as we speak. It will be. And Tom Metzinger, the great philosopher, I agree with him completely when he says, when this is proven, it's going to be a revolution in the mind sciences. How can you be awake and totally asleep at the same time? That's an oxymoron. Who says? Aristotle says, right? The binary view of the world says you can totally be awake and asleep at the same time. So this practice is marvelous. This is so much you can learn here just by hanging out in the formless dimensions of your being, because absence of awareness is not, how does it go? Awareness of absence is not absence of awareness. Awareness of absence is not absence of awareness. It's just formless awareness. So this is where the last one, sleep yoga, transitions into bardo yoga, and then I'll pause. Sleep yoga works with formless awareness. Formless means deathless. And so this is where the formless dimensions of sleep yoga transition into the penultimate practice of bardo yoga. This is a Tibetan word, basically refers to the after-death spaces. Bardo literally means gap, transitional process. The formlessness of sleep yoga leads to the deathlessness of the bardo yoga practices. And so again, so much to say with these 5. I'm so big on these. There's so much you can learn here. How does the jingle go? You can't add more years to your life, but you can add more life to your years. And so check out these numbers. Like I say this because why should we bother with this stuff? My life is so busy. I'm so full. I don't have time for this. Well, check out these numbers. You're going to enter the dream arena minimum 500,000 times during the course of this life. 25% of your sleep space minimum is spent in the dream arena. That's about a month a year. That amounts to maybe 6+ years on an average life. You can get a PhD in less than 6 years. If you attain lucidity in the dream arena, not only are you bringing consciousness to this dimension of your experience, it's like a consciousness hacking approach, but because you're working with more foundational dimensions of your being, you're actually it's like cheating. It's like the most direct approach to transformation because you're working with the most fluid, liquid, empty, in the healthy sense of Buddhist terms of emptiness, a dimension of your being where transformation can really rocket. The Tantras say practices you do in the dream arena are 7 to 9 times more efficacious, more transformative. Why? Because you're working with the roots of your experience. And so, just brief backing from the scientific community, your brain can't tell the difference between what's perceived, visualized, or dreamt. You dream about something, it changes your brain. So using the principles of neuroplasticity, you attain lucidity in the dream state. You engage in particular exercises, and studies have shown these are actually happening. You change your brain by the way you change your mind in the dream arena. And though the literature is replete, there are thousands of stories, and this is no exaggeration, people going to sleep, they have one hyperlucid dream that night. It changes their life forever.
Yeah.
Because it's like a near-death experience. It's so true. It's so hyper-real. It's so foundational. You wake up from one of these puppies and talk about lighting up. It lights up your whole life. It changes everything. And so you hear my energy and passion here because I've been blessed with these dreams because I practice this stuff. These dreams have informed my life. I have no doubt using dreams of prodromal dreams. I have no doubt they probably saved my life. Mm-hmm. They can totally change your life. So I'll pause because otherwise we're going to be here for hours. So much more to say here, but this is a massive contribution of the post-mindfulness thing where you take your mindfulness. A lucid dream is a mindful dream. Lucid sleep is mindful sleep. Bardo yoga is mindful dying. So you take the basis of mindfulness and now you spread it all the way across the rest of your life into the night and beyond. So that's why I get pretty jazzed about it.
I really love the framing of the liminal dreams. I think that's really powerful stuff and really potent because like you said, anyone can practice it. Sometimes I think there's a barrier of entry to even talk about lucid dreaming and people are like, that's not for me. And what I also love about these practices is that I can imagine many people, maybe they can, if they're raising kids, single person raising kids or really demanding job, they just don't have the time to meditate during the day. Maybe they can squeeze in a 10-minute meditation here or there. But with these practices, it's if you can get into this, if you can even practice it a little bit, like a couple of days a week, it's like you said, it could be game changing for you.
100%. And that's again why understanding all the benefits, which I barely just touched on, is huge. I don't have time to practice during the day. Geez. Well, a night shift, right? You can add a night shift to your life, right?
Yeah.
A night shift of meditation, either in the liminal space or in the lucid dreaming space. And again, this is precisely why I retrofitted in this liminality dreaming thing. That the term, a little bit more accurate term, is hypnagogic hypnopompic basis. Hypnos meaning the god of sleep. Gogic means leaning towards sleep or leaning towards the god of sleep. That's the front end. Popic, leading away from the god of sleep. That's what happens when you wake up before you get out of bed. Out of these interesting states of mind, right? And so instead of just indulging in whatever in the usual mindless way, now it's, hey, wait a second. And I do this every night. This is not work. This is fun for me. I sit there and I go, okay, I set the intentionality. I perfume the night with my intentionality, one of the most important ingredients. I bring my mindfulness to bear. I watch my mind as it transitions from the different states, from waking to semi-waking to dropping down, this kind of decrescendo. And then it's like I'm doing my meditation right there, right? I'm actually able to maintain my practice and bring it with me. And then with enough proficiency, it slides into lucid dreaming. And I can work with my meditations in the lucid dreaming arena. And just to reinstate yet again, practices you do in the dream arena with your meditations are more transformative because they're more foundational. You work with the roots, you change the leaves, the branches, the twigs, everything changes by working with the roots. That's why, again, these practices are worth the trouble.
Yeah, I really enjoy working with them too in an improvisational way. I have a background in music, and I just love that state and the feeling in the body too of just laying there. There's no pressure, and I just see the way color and sound and things just blend, and I can feel, I don't know if it's adenosine or something getting released in my body, and my body becomes more and more numb, more and more still, and just like doing that dance. And then the opposite in the morning, that state of kind of confusion. Where am I? What is this? The echoes of the dreams are still present maybe in my mind, and just watching that, what day is it? What time is it? What am I doing? And then you reconstruct yourself in slow motion.
Isn't it? Yeah, absolutely, positively. You can watch this construction, deconstruction process taking place. Yeah. What did you say at the outset? You were talking about, just before you talked about the adenosine thing, you said something that would click my attention, and I it slipped. Oh, the synesthesia. Yes. Synesthesia. Yeah. So this is you're a musician, so am I. Alexander Scriabin, I love the Russian composer. I play his piano music. This guy was way out there. And he possessed the quality of synesthesia, where when he heard sounds, he saw colors, he smelled things. And when you're in a liminal space like that, you can have these synesthetic experiences, just like you're talking about. So this is super interesting and very fun for artist types, where you start to see this synesthetic quality, how your senses intertwine and intermix. And you enter this amazing dimension of experience. And briefly, philosophically, why this becomes super interesting, you start to deconstruct not only the narrative self-sense of who you are, you start to deconstruct the parameters of physical reality altogether. Let me say a little bit about this. This is a big deal. Because one of the things that happens when you're in a liminal space and in a dream space, the laws of physics don't apply anymore. Causality in the normal way, space, time, causality do not apply anymore. That's why you can fly and do all these miraculous things. If you take a very close look, this is a really deep exploration of the nature of reality. Because what these experiences point out is that it's only in the highly contracted, constricted, most asleep state, which is this, the wake-centric supreme state to which we ascribe all parameters of reality. According to scientists, is the only way to describe mind and reality. Baloney. Mm-hmm. So what happens, it is only at this most constricted, constipated, wake-centric state that the laws of physics, space, time, causality apply. When the mind falls, it's like Rumi said, into winding rings of being, you start to deconstruct the very scaffolding of physical reality. Space and time falls away. This is why you can have dreams of precognition and prodromal dreams. All these amazing, miraculous things take place, and we dismiss it. Oh, that's cool, because we have this unconscious bias towards wake-centricity, because that's the only line or the only experience where ego is fully operational and online. And that's why ego dismisses these other states. And that's why the scientists dismiss these other states as less real. No, they're more real. And as you go farther and farther down into the deep, dreamless causal dimensions, like Ramana Maharshi said, an amazing statement, that which does not exist in deep, dreamless sleep is not real. Mm-hmm. What is the only thing that exists in deep, dreamless sleep? Awareness. What did we talk about 20 minutes ago? What's the only thing that exists? Awareness. Yeah. And so this is the most amazing thing. So reflect on this the next time you go to sleep. You wake up tomorrow morning and you're going to say in an unexamined way, this is so profound and it's really cool. It's a game changer. You're going to wake up tomorrow and you're going to say, God, I had a great dream. I slept well. Wow. Like we just say that without thinking. No, you didn't. Oh, there was no you that went through these states. There's only awareness. Mm-hmm. And so what we call the state of you is the most contracted, wake-centric state that looks upon these other states as less real only because the ego/you is less functional in that space. Mm-hmm. You didn't fall asleep. You didn't have a dream. You didn't wake up. It was nothing more than variations in the expansion and contraction of awareness itself. That's it. The only thing that went through the night last night was awareness. Mm-hmm. Created the dream space was a slightly more contracted dimension, some level of seeming physicality, some level of causality, temporality, spatiality, but not quite as reified up here, right? That's a partially contracted space. Dreamless space is completely open. Dream space, somewhat open. Waking state, completely contracted. So it's only at this contracted dimension, space, time, causality come into play. Unless we think, oh, this is just metaphysical mumbo jumbo. Hell no. Listen to the talk by Nima Arkani Hamed out of Princeton. Space, time is doomed. Listen to the work of Donald Hoffman, Bernardo Castro, Gross. Space and time are constructs. They're not the scaffolding of reality. They're the way we structure reality out of fear, fundamentally. So if you understand this, again, you can see how excited I get. Not only is this cool and fun and you do all this cool, oh my God, you're talking about the nature of mind and reality here.
Yeah.
You're going, oh my gosh, I never actually thought of this. This is effing amazing.
Yeah.
Every night I deconstruct because I don't exist. I'm a construct. Just like space, time, causality. I'm a construct too. Falls apart. Liminal dreaming shows you that. You enter the space that feels less real. No, it's more real. It's just less real for the ego. So then it appends this pejorative things. Oh, it's just a dream. That's a dismissive comment. It's actually more real. So many supporting evidences for that. And then all the way down to the deep dreamless space, which is the most awakened. And so you start to see this. This is amazing. You start to see this combustion cycle of contraction and expansion. My book on reverse meditation talked about this a ton. You start to realize this kind of pulsation of consciousness that creates the illusion of sleeping and dreaming and dying. And the person, the alleged I, the Michael or the Andrew that experiences all this, that's a total construct. That's a total illusion.
I think we know that intuitively, and that's the ultimate, is to see that that continuation, that the same awareness that's of us talking right now is the same awareness that's going to be present tonight when I'm hopefully dreaming. But I do wonder about the kind of duality of the dream self and the waking self and them knowing about each other. And I don't know if this is my own subconscious projections, but I feel like I go through phases where an analogy or metaphor I'll use is it's like a two-way mirror. And sometimes the dream self is looking in that mirror and all it sees is the dream world behind it. But sometimes he's able to peer through and see information about my waking life and vice versa. Where, and an example I'll give is that when I meet someone in a dream who's dead in real life, and my dream self doesn't question it. They're just like, oh, hey, it's John. Hey, man, what's up? Let's hang out. There's no awareness that this person's dead. Whereas other times there's more lucidity and I say, oh, wow, John's really dead, but he's here in a dream with me. And I'm just curious about that kind of interplay between the waking self and the dream self knowing about each other. And if there's
Yeah, they definitely cross-pollinate. And again, there's a little bit of, there's two things to say here that I think are worth sharing. One is in non-dual Shaiva Tantra, Kashmir Shaivism, the non-dual approach of the Hindu branch of Tantra, which I'm a big fan of this tradition. I'm not sure if it was Abhinavagupta or Tsimaraja. I think it was Abhinavagupta, but I'm not entirely sure. He has this really interesting granular approach to mind and the reality that is disclosed by that mind. And this is a wonderful, important, subtle interjection, because when I talk about these three kind of gross dimensions of waking, dreaming, and sleeping, this is just the crudest, roughest way to talk about the spectrum of mind. So what Abhinavagupta does, and then I'll share a little bit of how neuroscience is backing this, is he has a really interesting, much more granular way of looking at this, where he takes these three dimensions, and then he subdivides each of those three into three. So you have 9. So what it means is you have the awakening of awakening, the awakening of dreaming, the awakening of sleeping, the dreaming of dreaming, the awakening of dreaming, the sleeping of dreaming, all the way down. So now instead of having a clunky, gross, threefold approach, you have, you're a musician, you have a glissando of consciousness, a different complete rendering of the subtle granularity or micro, I used the term earlier. I love big words.
Can I title the episode The Glissando of Consciousness? Can I get that permission?
I like that. Glissando consciousness, that works. You develop this microphenomenology, the incredible capacity of the meditative mind to perceive, literally, not metaphorically, perceive more. The scientists have shown this, that just roughly speaking, the average untrained mind can refine and perceive reality at about 250 milliseconds before what's called attentional blink comes online.
Mm-hmm.
They figure this out with really cool strobe-like kind of things. Basically trying to find what is the irreducible mind moment. How discernible can the mind actually be? They studied really advanced meditators. They have up to a tenfold, if not more, increase. So instead of 250 milliseconds, they can refine reality and perceive it at a granular level that's 25 milliseconds. In other words, not a metaphor. Meditators literally see more, feel more, right? Taste more, touch more. They are literally more in contact with reality, which again is why I think as Dalai Lama could say, happiest moment right now, because they're so present. So you develop this property of the mind through meditation, you start to see this glissando of consciousness. And now the neuroscientists are backing it up with more refined neuroimaging techniques when they used to think, oh, all these synchronous brain waves, you're asleep, there's another kind of colossal synchronous. No, the neuroscientists are now showing through scanning images that one part of your brain can be awake while the other part is asleep. And so this is completely resonant with, again, I'm not sure if it was Abhinavagupta, but maybe this kind of really refined microphenomenological approach that allows the mind to perceive all these different dimensions of being in a simultaneous manner. So it's no surprise at all that you can have kind of cross-pollination between the waking space and the dream space. It happens anyway. Here's a gross example. You're in a really cold room, you're sleeping. Chances are pretty good. You're not going to be dreaming about Hawaii. You're going to be dreaming about skiing or snow or something like that, because something is being communicated from the waking space to the dream space. That's a gross example. But the idea here, and this is where it leads to some really interesting fruitional statements, is that as you develop heightened awareness to all these states, you're literally, my playful languaging, opening interstate commerce. You're allowing the mind to cross-pollinate and traffic insights from all these different states. And this is precisely the genius of the nocturnal meditations. So it's not just what happens under the blanket and the comforter of the night in the sleep and dream state. No. What you do with these experiences, and this is the Buddhist languaging here is really interesting. They talk about the nighttime dream as the example dream or the double delusion. Now, how interesting is that? What that therefore intimates, what's the primary dream? What's the real delusion? This. And so what you do is you use the nocturnal mind in the dream arena as a laboratory. The study of the mind as it manifests in that dimension. Then you take that and you interstate traffic it back to the waking state. This is where lucid dreaming leads to lucid living. And lest we forget, what's the fifth of the nocturnal meditations? The death practices, bardo. So lucid dreaming, wait, if you buy now, it's not just 2 for the price of 1. It's 3 for the price of 1. Because not only does lucid dreaming ping back to bring about lucid living, and we can say, what does that really mean? It pings forward to bring about lucid dying. The capacity to actually die and transition in a fully conscious, lucid way. Therefore, yeah, spot on. This is really the gift of the whole thing. You start to open all these, a little bit what happens in a certain sense with psychedelics, by the way, with the anthropic brain. Somewhat analogous to that. Capacity for the mind to communicate using particular built-in Wi-Fi systems that previously wouldn't be able to communicate with each other. And this is why, it's not just, this is why the Eastern approach to mind and reality is so much more sophisticated. Because instead of literally a one-dimensional flat land, wake-centric, this is the only way to perceive reality, forget the dream state, forget the sleep state, it's not real. BS. Now you're working in a complete 3-dimensional way. You're opening all 3 eyes. You're disclosing reality, not just from the wake-centric state. Now your philosophy, your metaphysics, your life is derived in a cross-pollinating 3-dimensional way, where all 3 aspects of the full spectrum of your being are actually engaged. Now you're living life with the gaslight on. Now you're living life completely aware. This is the way the Buddhas live. The fully awakened ones maintain this kind of 24/7 awareness. It doesn't mean they stay up all night playing video games. Basically means they replace this clunky Western light switch model, yes, no, black, white, dead, alive, awake, asleep. They basically replaced it with an Eastern dimmer. And so instead of just clicking off, no, you're just going from gross to subtle to super subtle, and then back up the next morning from super subtle to gross. And so someone who has this capacity, again, you like this term, I do too, I'm a pianist, this glissando of the mind, right? You could see the mind as it's sliding up and down this keyboard. Now all these spectrums and dimensions of your being are made available to you. And hira, is that not only a really fun thing to do, it's a really radically transformative thing.
The sort of crescendo of all this, to continue the music analogy, is, like you said, the bardo practice, which is, I think you were saying, the kernel of the purpose of all this is to develop, as you described in the last chapter, unconditional happiness. But I think also to develop, if you can develop all these different vectors of awareness, from nocturnal to the awareness, the reverse meditations, because for the most likely when we're dying, there'll be some pain and discomfort, is to have a good death, to be present, to have a good death, and to navigate that through the bardo practice of hopefully having a good rebirth, if that's part of our cosmology.
Yeah, again, especially the Buddhists, boy, the whole teachings on bardo yoga are massive here, even the sort of thing. And again, it just makes so much sense to me that, yes, if you can maintain this type of lucidity / awareness, and this is actually dream yoga came about largely as a way to prepare for death. They talk about the dream arena as what's called a concordant or similitude experience of what's called the bardo, of becoming in the bardos. And so you can maintain lucidity in the dream arena. They say that it's completely analogous, concordant to the type of experience you're going to have at the dream. They talk about death, such an interesting term, the dream at the end of time. So if you can maintain lucidity here, you maintain lucidity there. And then this is why is it a game changer? In a deep philosophical way, if you don't wake up in your nighttime dream tonight, if you don't wake up and take some semblance of control over what happens in your mind, what controls your mind? Your habits. Or in Eastern language, karma. It's the same thing. You don't become lucid in your dream. What controls the manifestation of your dream? Your karma, your habits. It's involuntary birthing. The mind is always birthing. It's involuntary birthing at the level of the dream. According to this wisdom tradition, exactly the same thing happens when you die. If you don't wake up and attain lucidity in the dream arena at the end of time in a death space, what takes over? Your habits, your karma. So this is why the sage Trungpa Rinpoche, when he was asked, what is it that reincarnates? What did he say so beautifully? Your bad habits. That's a brilliant statement. And so basically, you attain lucidity at night, you attain lucidity at the dream of time, and then just like you can voluntarily shape your mind at night to create a lucid dream of your desire, you can voluntarily not just shape a dream, according to this tradition, you can shape an entire life. You can actually, using this plasma dimension of mind, pour your mind into a physical form, so-called physical form, volitionally, intentionally, driven not by ignorance and habit and karma, but driven by love and kindness and compassion. And so this is what, again, a little esoteric here, this is what the wisdom traditions talk about as the avatars, the great tulkus, the great voluntary rebirthers that come back into this dream out of love and kindness and compassion, like His Holiness the Dalai Lama or all the other great spiritual masters. They basically go through this whole journey with complete, utter lucidity. They literally never fall asleep. The mind just goes from gross to super subtle. They never fall asleep because sleep is a product of ignorance. You have to have an unconscious mind to fall asleep. At these levels, the unconscious mind is impurified. So I'll pause there because I don't know how much roadkill we want. It gets a little bit esoteric and a little deep, but to me, whoa, now we're talking about some really profound aspects of how far these go, right? So we've gone, awesome, right? So we've gone from over-the-counter, I love this, talk about Glissando. We've gone from over-the-counter, wonderful, majestic mindfulness of breath and mindfulness of body, wonderful, all the way to the bardo yoga trajectory of using the mind developed by mindfulness to help you transition from one life to the next. Now, there's a glissando. Now
Yes.
that's going from gross to really subtle. Oh, fun taking this.
Yeah, no, it's beautiful, beautiful journey. It's just a beautiful map. And the title of your book, as I mentioned in the beginning, I'm mindful. Now what it belies how profound what you're presenting here. It's a funny title. I think a lot of people will pick it up because of the title, because it's a very provocative title, but moving beyond mindfulness to meet the modern world. And thank you so much, Andrew. This has been really a delight for me to spend this time with you. And thanks for being generous with your time today.
Oh, it's fun. Yeah, great questions, Michael. I really appreciate the thoughtfulness. The depth really makes it fun for me. So I really appreciate that. And really fun to hang with. Appreciate it.
And thank you for listening to The Sounds of Sand. We invite you to explore more of our talks, dialogues, videos, articles, events, and offerings through our website, scienceandnonduality.com. If you've enjoyed this conversation, please consider becoming a member to access our massive library of Sand content, available exclusively to Sand members. And we would love it if you could leave us a review on Apple Podcasts, Google, and Spotify. And share this episode with your family, friends, and all sentient beings. Be well.